Hello and welcome to the Into the North podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Noobzors. And today we have a special episode, not one of our standard episodes. Today we are joined by two non-hosts for a. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll have one of our regular co-hosts, Spleenface, will be taking over as our main moderator and question asker, because today's episode is all about the Gitrog Monster, and we've got Leptys and Kiebitzen with us to discuss this. It's not going to be just a basic intro to the deck. We're going to really get into the nitty gritty. So let's have our main moderator question asker, Spleenface, take over from here.
So this episode, we've got our three Gitrog experts who, as already mentioned, are Noobzors, and Leptys. And I'm sort of here as someone who maybe knows a little bit less about the deck to, ask questions and, sit in the middle and make sure everything stays civil, no one's at each other's throats. And, just sort of move things along when they have to. So let's get to that now. Our first guest who's here today is Kiebitzen. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Kiebitzen on pretty much every platform. I've been playing Gitrog since I saw the first Bruise Day. Pretty much right when I joined the Reddit group, I started looking at the Bruise Days and got really excited about these crazy loops. Started playing the deck and wrote my primer not long after that, and I've been brewing ever since.
All right, thanks for that. And our next guest is Leptys.
Hello, everybody. My name is Leptys, also known as Leptys207 in the subreddit, in the CDH subreddit at least. I started EDH, I think, in 2015. Then 2016, I started playing competitively, and in the summer of 2017, I started playing Gitrog. So I have a few years of experience with both competitive EDH as well as playing with the Gitrog Monster. And I wrote a primer of my own in the summer of 2017, and also you might recognize me from the Lab Maniacs deck tech that we also put up in the late months of 2017. So I've been very involved with the deck and its evolution.
All right, and Noobzors, you've introduced yourself before, but is there anything you want to say about yourself, maybe in the context of Gitrog, before we dive in?
So Gitrog was kind of my first high tier competitive deck. I started it was basically, so my first CDH deck was Viral's Hulk by Sick Robot. And then quickly after that, I realized that, oh my god, this deck dies to like every stacks piece, because we were in a green-white meta. And I was like, okay, let's move along to something else. And that's when I found Gitrog. I'd been aware of the deck before. I'd played against it a bunch. I was actually quite knowledgeable about it because I was playing Marin at GP Toronto over the summer of 2017, and there in every deck, I ran into, there was a Gitrog deck in almost every pod. And after reading some primers about it, I was like, okay, I know exactly what they're going to do and what they're doing. They're trying to be coy, they're casting their Scourge Familiar, and they're like, oh, I'll pass the turn. I'm like, guys, this Gitrog deck needs to die. This is what's going to happen. And then, from there, I eventually joined the dark side and took up Gitrog. In 2017, Leptys's primer, Kiebitzen's primer, just read everything I could, and joined the Frog Discord. And from there, the rest is history. Lots of brewing and innovations going on. Meeting lots of new Frog players. Good times all around.
Yeah, to be honest, Noobzors has been one of the most productive and sportsmanlike characters in the Frog community. So his addition to our ranks has been very welcomed.
Oh, thanks, man. That means a lot.
Absolutely.
Super sappy.
All right.
You guys, you guys are also great. Yeah, I don't know. I love everyone on the Frog Discord. We've got such a good group.
I mean, it's easy to call them sporting when you don't play against them much, but
Good point.
okay. So all of our guests here have primers. We'll link any lists they want to show off in the description of this podcast. So this isn't about an intro to the deck or sort of the basics. We're really going to be trying to do a deep dive and get into some harder questions and the questions that maybe even the really experienced pilots of this deck disagree on. But before we do that, we're just going to do a very brief overview, just in case you don't know much about the deck. So the first bit of that is, what does your average game look like? Well, let's start with Leptys.
All right, so I've, at least from us three, I think I'm probably the most conservative player, even on the Gitrog side of things, which is very, very head-on and aggressive a lot of the time. But basically, the game plan is to construct this combo of just getting a discard outlet and Gitrog on the field, as well as a Dagmar salvage in our hand, so we can go off. So basically, we just try and ramp into Gitrog and get her on the field as soon as possible, and then just land a discard outlet, tutor a Dagmar, and start going off with the combo that I'm not gonna go into right now because I hope our
we're gonna assume you guys know that.
Yeah, we're gonna assume you guys know that already. At least the
just read one
basics.
of the many primers.
Yeah,
yep.
All the variations too. You better know all the. Well, we can talk about some of that later or now. Like there's a bunch of different loops. The loops have changed over the years or months, however you want to quantify this. But from thinking certain pieces were necessary, and outlet cards and whatnot. So I don't know if all the primers are necessarily up to date with some of the loops. Keeb, have you updated your primer with BIOS loops? Do you know?
It's pretty out of date.
Okay, yeah. So if you want the most up to date loops,
I wrote it.
Come to the Gitrog server and bug one of the people who are purple or green with the roles to explain the loops to you.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to find out the precise, most up-to-date information. I'm trying my best to update the primer as much as I can, and I've updated at least the crop rotation loops with whatever. We can go into that later, but what I've done in the updating side of things is very brutal and very pragmatic. I've just added the stuff in their corresponding sections, and I have not cut anything, and it looks confusing as all hell. But
it seems like after this we totally should write a doc.
Yeah.
Put together a PDF that's, these are all the different loops that you might want to use. So that people can, slam down their PDF at the GP and say, "Look here, I win."
I would like to propose. I would like to propose a shortcut.
Lepty says this is good. You guys should all concede.
Yep.
Yeah. Get all of the take screenshots of all the time we harass judges chat.
Yeah, but when it comes down to the game plan is just get a discard outlet, get Gitrog, and ramp into both of those as fast as you can, and then keep up your land drops so you don't have to sacrifice Gitrog, and then tutor for Dagmar and win. Sometimes you use an Ad Nauseam or a Necropotence to assemble your combo pieces, but most of the time you can just naturally draw into one combo piece and then tutor the other, which is very, very usual for this and natural for this deck to operate. So that's also one of the reasons why it's so unpredictable, because it doesn't rely on these linchpin cards like Ad Nauseam or Necropotence to go off all the time.
Yeah, I've often heard the deck described as a cockroach because it just won't die. Even if your board is empty and you're back down on 2 lands or something like that, or even 0, within a couple turns you can come back and combo off pretty consistently.
Yeah, Spleen would be able to say a lot playing against the Gitrog. What sort of that like? I've definitely heard him say stuff like, oh my god, the Gitrog monster is a threat. I'm like, I have Gitrog in play and I've got like no cards in hand. He's like, I know, it's scary.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, if Gitrog is in play, there's no discounting the fact that you could easily just win from there. It's pretty incredible. There's so many cards you can draw that just get you there. You have so much card advantage.
Which is why I recommend Zer's weirding. Make sure they can't draw cards.
Yeah, if anyone wants to know, there was a tournament game with Kiebitzen and Spleen where Zer's weirding just was an absolute monster.
Card is brutal.
Okay. Anything else from this question, Spleen?
I guess we can quickly go through the next part, which is what turn are you looking to play the Gitrog Monster, and when are you trying to combo it?
As soon as possible, usually, I think.
Yeah. Turn 1 onward, you're trying to play it and combo.
Yeah,
I pretty much try to combo every turn that I think that I possibly can. I am an incredibly aggressive frog player. I know Leptys said that he's a little less or a little more conservative, but that my favorite part about the game is the fact that it is so resilient that you can try to combo on turn 2, and if you get stopped, you can probably still try to combo on turn 3 and again on turn 4 and again on turn 5 if you keep getting stopped. Like, the deck is just so resilient that I just always try to go for it if I think it's a possibility.
I think I'm somewhere between Leptys and Kiebitzen in terms of conservative, aggressive players. There was a game recently where I had the option to cast an ad nauseum main phase and sort of go for it from there, but I was like, I'll wait to eat up some counter magic and that sort of thing, and those stuff obviously I'm sure Kiebitzen does as well. It does. It's
just jam it.
Yeah, I just jam it. No fear. Make them have it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you kind of read the pod.
Yeah. By contrast.
Okay, so.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. No,
Okay. Yeah. On contrast, while Kiebitzen goes balls deep on the lines, and Noob Source could be either or. I'm the guy who always gets life from the loam and starts grinding into the infinity.
I don't think I've ever tutored life from the loam.
Wow, that's actually insane.
I tutor it
always
all the
go
time.
for the win. Sometimes I draw life from the loam, but I don't think I've ever tutored it.
Yeah, I tutor it all the time.
You mentioned turn 2. How realistic is casting the frog on turn 2? Like, does it happen 10%, 50%, 1% of the time?
I don't know if I can put a percentage to it, but it's a surprisingly high amount of the time you're able to cast frog on turn 2. Usually the gating factor is getting the colored mana, and that's why it happens on turn 2 more than it ever does on turn 1, because you have so many sources of mana, so many rituals, so many mana positive cards, but it often comes down to making sure that you can get one of each color, because a lot of the rituals, like you dark ritual with the land you played for turn, but then you've only got black mana, so you've got some artifacts that get you the rest of the mana, but you still need that green. So things like that tend to be the gate.
The easiest turn 2 frog is definitely just Mana Crypt. Oh, so not Mana Crypt, Mana Vault. Mana Vault, yeah.
Mana Vault with a swamp and then a forest, and you got a turn 2 frog. So that's one card that by itself in your hand, with some lands, gets you turn 2 frog, and on top of that there are a handful of rituals and mana positive things that can you have 2 of them in your hand, and that gets you turn 2 frog as well. So turn 2 frog is pretty surprisingly common, though often you want to deploy some other stuff first and then drop frog on turn 3 when you can then follow it up with the discard outlet and the win. Because as it turns out, people are starting to become wise to the fact that if they let you keep a frog, it doesn't usually go well for them.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we forgot to. I think we didn't mention that this question was from Ifeno. I don't think. So yeah, Ifeno, thanks for those questions.
Okay. Yeah, the other part of this was how aggressively do you mulligan, but we actually have a section later on where we're going to go much more in depth into mulliganing, so hopefully that will answer the questions you have there.
Yes.
And the last thing I want to say before we dive into the history of the Gitrog combo is that we're going to be omitting the rules discussion around what is and isn't slow play and which combos you can do without the risk of that and which you can't, because we are trying to organize just a brief little talk with as high a level judge as we can to really nail everything down. So that will not be a focus for this main part.
Yep. It's also a discussion worth a couple hours by itself, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into the history of Gitrog. And I guess we kick it off with Leptys.
Alright, so even though out of us three, I'm not the first player of Gitrog, Kiebitzen is the first one, but I've been around the CEDH community and the Discord community as well as the Reddit community for a while before I started playing Gitrog myself. It started actually on the day Gitrog was spoiled. It was, I think, May 2016, the early summer or the late spring, where we held our subreddit Discord for CDH held their first Bruise Day, which was held by the Gitrog Monster, and there were people like Shaper Savant, which is one of our head moderators in the CDH Discord, as well as the subreddit, as well as Razliox, who has been a big Golgari player in the past with things like Jarad, Graveyard Midrange. You might know that deck from MTG Salvation. But there were several other people as well helping brew the deck. But what it came down to was Razliox was one of the main people playtesting the deck, and he just came up with all these crazy lines and combos with the Kozilek and shuffling effects and looping a single spell to kill a player or just go off with something. And this Four Horsemen-ish combo package carried on to his list, which is called Get Good Monster Dredge, I think. You can find that on Tapped Out as well as some other outlets. You can also ping us in
we'll
Discord.
link to that in the show notes for this podcast.
Yeah, you can find it from there. But basically, that's where it all started. That was the first fine-tuned Gitrog Monster deck. And after at least a few months, I think, and that was the time when Kiebitzen got his list and primer up. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little later to join the actual subreddit, but as soon as I joined the subreddit, I saw the Bruise Day list that they had come up with, which if you look at is pretty incredible how close it is to the list we're playing today. They're running a lot of the same core, but I saw that list and I just got so excited by that deck that I built it immediately. And it wasn't. I don't think it was until later in 2017 that I actually released my primer. Took me a while to figure out all the loops and start actually writing them down and trying to sort of synthesize them into something that was digestible. But I started playing as soon as I could because I couldn't get enough of those fancy loops. Yeah, I love stacking triggers. I love responding to other people doing stuff with winning, and so that was incredibly satisfying to me. And so yeah, I've just been innovating on it since I first saw it then.
Yeah, to add to that, I, by contrast, was horrified of the Gitrog Monster by the time it came out because of the complexity and the amount of rules controversies that surround the Four Horsemen-ish stuff as well as the discard step loop, and I actually avoided the deck like a plague for 6 months at least, or even 8 months. But at the start of January, when the 2017 Winter CDH subreddit started the tournament for CDH, I was like, hell, I have no idea how this deck works, but let's try it out. And then I went ahead and won the around 50-person tournament, which was kind of incredible for a person who hasn't played the deck prior to the start of the tournament. So yeah, I ran Razliox's list at the time, and at the start of May, the tournament ended with me as the winner, and I went ahead and tuned my own version of the deck and wrote a primer for it in the summer 2017. So a couple months after Kiebitzen's primer came out.
Yeah, and then like I said, September 2017 is about when I started playing Gitrog, and you know, the complexity of the deck was definitely a draw for what I wanted to play. You know, all the loops was really tantalizing to learn them all. And definitely when I first started playing, Spleen and Null would like shit test me on making sure like they wouldn't just scoop automatically. They'd make sure I knew all the loops and how to do everything, and so that was fun. And then now, so I got pretty good at being able to do them, and then now everyone just scoops. So now I'm super rusty when I have to do loops again.
You're not the only one. You're not the only one.
That's why we need a doc. We'll get that done. We'll do that.
I have been guilty of bringing up my primer on my phone and just showing it to people when they ask me to do the loops. Like, no, trust me, I have done these loops before. I wrote this primer.
Yeah.
Just take a look here.
Yeah, and then so if we're just more history wise, so when I played, I think, Leptys's list straight up for a while, just to kind of, well, I was getting my feet under me, and then like Leptys did to Razliox's list, you know, started making my own tweaks. I think one of the first things I did was put in a hand attack, because I think that was standard in Kiebitzen's list at the time. And
I tested that out early on.
Yeah, it was very, I quite liked the hand attack quite a lot. Able to be proactive in disrupting opponents and pretty aggressive when trying to combo off to eat counter spells for a single black mana was quite strong. And then I started thinking a lot about Gitrog and slot efficiency. I think one of the first things I ever said on the Frog Discord was why not Collective Brutality over Praetor's Grasp as a outlet card. That was based off my testing with the hand attack and enjoying it a lot. And then, you know, from there, I kept suggesting things that people thought were crazy at the time.
That's how innovation happens, right?
Yeah.
The more people
I got a nickname.
Tell you that your suggestions and your ideas are complete bullcrap, the more you can be sure that you're going in the right direction when it comes to innovation.
Yeah, a lot of the innovation wasn't necessarily like there were some new cards. Like I know, I think Survival was me, and then Ulamog was obviously me. Or like the Ulamog loops. I think I looked back in the Discord and someone had mentioned Ulamog earlier, but I think that was mostly in terms of the general utility if you ever have to cast
you could use the other one.
But a lot of what I was doing, I think, was sort of questioning card choices and trying to improve slot efficiency, or some cards that were kind of like included by default. I think like Dryad Arbor was one that I just wanted to get rid of so badly. I hate that card, man, so much.
Yeah, I mean, you did a lot of really good work, sort of changing the way cards were looked at, to focus more on making sure that the cards are individually powerful, and not just that they, sort of have decent synergy with other cards that are being played. which I think is a smart approach in a format where there's no guarantee that you're going to get any two pairings of cards. You have to sort of pay attention to how does this card stand on its own. And Dryad Arbor is a perfect example of that, right? Like it has a lot of really interesting and useful synergies that like make a handful of other cards slightly better or have slightly more options, right? Like it gives you an option to do the tutor, the creature tutors, have those go get a land if you need a land to discard, and it makes the Green Sun Zenith turn into a ramp option instead of just going to get discard outlets or
and then there's
protection.
the fetch.
But by itself, it's just pretty bad, and the amount that it adds to those other couple cards, it sort of doesn't really outweigh the card quality that you lose by including it. And I think that was sort of a paradigm shift that you introduced into the way that we as a Discord started evaluating the cards. And I think that was very helpful.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, I kind of, when I thought about the, when I thought about the Ulamog loops, I think I'd told Spleen, I think I was on them with Spleen and Null. You guys were privy to the Ulamog loops, I'm pretty sure, before I mentioned them on the Discord server, because I was testing with them. But I was, when I debuted, when I kind of posted the Ulamog loops, I think people were talking about it on the server, and I was like, or there, I feel like it felt like they were getting close to it. I was like, I just gotta spoil all the stuff I was thinking about. And so like in that, also stuff that isn't necessarily playable. Like so some of the stuff in Frog, this is why it's such a fun deck, is you can think of things like using a Chain of Smog as a discard outlet, or that was a fun one.
That's one of the crazy ones.
Yeah,
I like that.
Or the like alternate Doomsday loops, or WinCon piles and things like that. But yeah, and since then, like definitely bouncing ideas off the Gitrog Discord and Keeb definitely inspired. You wouldn't give up on Basalt Monolith, which made me like really inclined to test it. And then that's how we got to like Somberwald Sage and whatnot. So, constant back and forth,
and later to Jiraga as well.
Yes, which we'll talk about later or in the next section.
Yeah, and it was your changes that inspired me to run a new deck list, try some crazy things when I played in the Cockatrice tournament that was held. I forget, it was a while back.
I think it was the late summer of this year.
This year, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it must have been.
Or you must you probably are listening this to at 2019, but yeah, I'm talking about the late summer of 2018.
Yeah. And I won that tournament with Gitrog as well. So I think
busted ban Gitrog.
I don't remember who won the second tournament that was held by the subreddit. But at least two of the three online tournaments were won by a Gitrog deck, which is pretty incredible considering the diversity of decks in the format. That two of them would be won by the same deck.
Okay, and I guess
that was pretty
before
cool.
we wrap it up, so we're kind of up to we just cut everyone up to date on what Frog is kind of looking like now, where we've cut back on some slots, improved efficiency, and our WinCon package, at least in some versions, is like on looping Ulamog, but I guess now with Assassin's Trophy you can just loop Assassin's Trophy, so Ulamog loops aren't necessary.
You give people a lot of basics with Assassin's Trophy. I still prefer to loop Ulamog when I have the chance.
Yeah, definitely, it's definitely cleanest, I think. But yeah, so the more WinConless version, as it was dubbed on the server, where you wouldn't use the traditional WinCons of looping a Wrath's Edge or a Sunscorched Desert. Instead, you'd destroy everyone's permanents with Ulamog, loop Hand Attack, Noxious Revival to Fate Seal, and all these kinds of things, and then eventually kill them with combat through pumping your discard outlets. So that's kind of where Frog is now. Let's briefly speculate on the future of Frog and kind of what everyone's experimenting with, because I've mentioned Gitrog Blitz or the double Titan Gitrog list a few times in previous podcasts. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm testing with right now, and it's something.
Yeah, I definitely find that list interesting. I'm always a fan of upping tutor density, and being able to run things like Tainted Pact, and stuff like that exiles is pretty strong.
You had tested with Tainted Pacts before with Single Titan,
yeah,
right?
with Single Titan I tested Tainted Pact, and it was a little underwhelming. I found myself having to stop more often than I wanted to prevent myself from, removing pieces that I needed to be able to combo off. And I think that doing Double Titan just makes that a little bit less likely. It gives you more redundancy, and more protection from sort of hamstringing yourself with your tutors. But instant speed demonic tutor is pretty busted. So finding a way to make that work, even if it raises your average CMC by a little bit, I think it may be worth it, and that direction may be worth exploring.
One thing,
especially for Gitrog players like me that are sort of crazy about going all out every turn. Try to win every time you can.
One thing, one benefit of Double Titan that I hadn't realized until just the other day was that it actually is beneficial in the cleanup step combo, in that it acts. So typically we've got Guy's Blessing in the deck in like standard Gitrog versions to act as single target Grave Hate protection, so that you just respond to the Grave Hate by continuing your Dredge and then hitting your Blessing, resolving the shuffle, and then protecting your Titan. But in that version, in the cleanup step combo, your Titan is extremely vulnerable, right? Because the shuffle is going to go on the stack, and you can't actually continue your Dredge because you're using the cleanup step as your outlet. So what I actually found is with Double Titan, it really doesn't matter because they exile your Titan and then you keep going because you've got your second Titan.
You've got your other one.
Yeah. And then also, like, typically people are like, oh, people might think, oh, you've got to force them to play it out because what if you hit two Titans at the same time? If they're using like Fairy Macabre or like a Tormod script or something, that could be bad. I guess actually Tormod script is bad anyway because they'll just nuke all your pieces. But yeah, so something like Fairy Macabre could be bad. But you can keep a Titan in hand. If you ever draw a Titan, you can just keep it in hand to keep it safe. So the odds of that are like almost zero of happening. So yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Blitz is definitely interesting. Still lots of testing, very experimental. So try these at your own risk.
Yeah, those ad nauseas into Titan certainly certainly may make you reconsider.
Yeah.
The chances are low. So.
Yeah, by contrast, I personally it's gonna be far ahead for when before I start experimenting with something like Double Titan, just because the demonic tutors, or the instant speed demonic tutor-esque function of something like Tainted Pact becomes in my conservative playstyle a little bigger impulse, if you will. Because I'm too scared. I'm a scaredy cat when it comes to just conserving cards and not being blown out by something getting exiled. And basically I'm in the tail end of these two Noobzors and Kiebitzen, so I'm just only now have I started to experiment with the win-conless loops, and even then I have not really played with Ulamog. I still play with Beast Within just because I love the card, and it has saved me enough times for me to keep it in my list. But essentially the same loops and the same techniques that these two have been experimenting with for the last at least 6 months now, or 5 months. I've started dipping my toes into those. So I'm a little in the late train kind of thing right now, but still, it's
anything
very
else
promising.
you would experiment with, either of you two? Anything else you're looking at?
I haven't been experimenting with anything new lately. I haven't seen anything that caught my interest. I mean, some of the cards that we'll talk about later in the single card discussion might come up, but
Okay.
I'm always excited to see new cards released, because you never know when there might be something exciting in there. I mean, Assassin's Trophy was definitely a good pickup for the deck.
Kind
It's nice
of
to have
disappointing
good
though with
unconditional removal.
Commander 2018 with there was supposed to be a land matter deck and I was so ready to get a new Gitrog
Yeah.
card.
No, I knew ahead of time there wasn't going to be anything in that for us.
Glad.
It's casual lands matter, which means lands matter as long as you're casting 6 drops.
Okay, cool.
I mean, Underrealm Lich also is super cool. I just wish it weren't a 5-drop.
Yeah, same with the Doom Whisperer. Like so close, so
another
close.
Awesome card.
Yeah, Underrealm Lich
costs,
has actually...
If it costs 2 mana...
It'd be busted at 2. I'd play that at like 3.
Oh, no.
If it cost 2 mana and it was a 0/1 with not flying.
Yeah, I'd
just
play
pay
that.
2 life.
I'd play that. I'd play that.
I'd play
It
it.
would be
I'd play
super
it.
good. Yeah, Underrealm
Okay.
Lich has seen play in a couple of brews that I've seen in the Gitrog Discord. I think Jim Wolfie at least has
It's a
experimented
fantastic
with.
card.
Yeah, has
But it
experimented
competes
with the Razaketh package. And,
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And also he also put in Underrealm Lich as an extra reanimator target, and he has been just praising the card as much as he has could.
So that's actually something that I've considered exploring more, is the reanimator side of Gitrog. We're already kind of graveyard dependent, so the some of the downsides of being weak to grave hate of reanimation is less of a big deal because we're already weak to it. And I feel like there's definitely potential there. I just haven't found anything that was worth playing around with, and maybe Razaketh is the answer.
I feel like with Razaketh though, missing out on things like Relic Warder, like you need to be late enough in the game that like you lose your early wins that Razaketh can sometimes allow you to do, right? Like you're just turn 1 Dork, turn 2, reanimate, Entomb, reanimate, like win. Because you need, if you're dependent on having a supply of lands in order to get your like life to be really good, so that you can find all your fast mana to get Gitrog into play and whatnot. And I wonder if it's just too slow.
Yeah, just going off with extra steps.
Yeah. And also just another fatty in the deck. I mean, I guess you wouldn't run that in Blitz. But
double Titan and Razaketh. All right,
and Adnos,
here we go.
Okay.
Almost as good as Yuriko ad nauseum. Let's not get into that though.
Okay, I think that wraps up our history section. Just a couple of things that were mentioned. The tournament that Kiebitzen won was May 20th, and the last tournament went to Astral Codex playing Razakeths, just for posterity's sake.
Okay.
So now we are going to move into our next section, which is the single card and card category discussions. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is additional tutors, which ones maybe are considered, which ones aren't, and why. So let's start this off with tutors.
Okay, yeah. So some of the things some of the cards I ended up cutting because I didn't like were Sylvan Scrying, Realms Uncharted, which were cards that were tutors, and I haven't really missed them, honestly. Realms Uncharted had Sylvan Scrying. I much prefer Grim Tutor now to Sylvan Scrying, and also when I cut Sylvan Scrying, that's when we started moving towards Summoner's Pact. And that was also the time of Survival of the Fittest, I think. So we were going up on tutor density, and Sylvan Scrying just kind of was a bit too narrow. And then So Sylvan Scrying, Realms Uncharted. Realms Uncharted had the added benefit of sometimes getting you up to enough cards in hand. But in order to make those piles work, you needed to have run some suboptimal lands that I wasn't a fan of. So I ended up cutting those from my list. So those I think are falling somewhat out of favor. They're not necessarily bad. But yeah,
they're by no means bad.
Yeah.
Right? a lot of the stuff we talk about is, how do we, scrape a tiny bit more optimization out of those last like 2 or 3 cards in this 100-card deck, and many of these cards that we've been cutting to do those optimizations are incredibly powerful, really good cards for Gitrog, right? And in a budget list, you run Sylvan Scrying and you run Realms Uncharted with in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
right?
you're happy about it, man. Those cards are really good.
They get half of your win con at the very least, or other utility lands to protect you from counters. Like, we're not saying these cards are bad. It's just that they're right on that cusp of being just edged out by other cards that we want to make space for.
Yeah, basically the all of the cards we are gonna discuss here are very, very viable in Gitrog already, and we're in the nitty gritty of the fine tuning of the deck that we're discussing here. So if you have, for example, budget constraints or just playstyle preferences that I have plenty of. For example, I still love Sylvan Scrying, and I'm probably never gonna cut it myself. Please run those cards and see to it that you play with the cards that you like, because there's plenty of customizability for Gitrog Monster.
And we always need more people testing cards and
for sure
playing new stuff and seeing how it does. That always helps too.
Yeah. So Leptys, let's make this podcast interesting. Okay. Let's. I'm gonna fight you on Sylvan Scrying. Okay. So I think Sylvan Scrying should be Grim Tutor. I think Grim Tutor is just so much more, has so much more utility. It's obviously Sylvan Scrying, plus you can also find your other combo pieces or an answer to remove, some stacks piece. Especially in a more conservative playstyle, I think Grim Tutor, the utility afforded by Grim Tutor, it just makes it far superior to Sylvan Scrying.
Yeah.
Paying 3 mana for a tutor makes me feel like a casual.
All the casuals playing Grim Tutor,
Yeah. The reason why I'm not playing Grim Tutor myself is just because I run Praetor's Grasp, which is basically a better Grim Tutor for our metagame.
Oh, okay. Wow, shots fired there.
I think. Do I need to drop a beat for this discussion?
Yeah.
I think the fact that Praetor's Grasp can't tutor Dakmor to hand, Praetor's Grasp is Diabolic Tutor tier. Except, like, worse than Diabolic Tutor, because if you're trying to tutor Dakmor to hand, well, I guess you get the Entomb, so you can send Dakmor to the bin, so then it's Diabolic Tutor. But if you're trying to find a discard outlet, like, oh god, that's just not good. Not good trying to do that.
Yeah, basically the
sometimes you find other people's chains of Mephistopheles, or you just take people's Adnaz and then draw all of the things you need.
The Adnaz is definitely where you'd like to be, but I think having to Praetor's Grasp for Adnaz to then find your combo piece instead of just finding your missing combo piece is kind of weak.
Yeah, it's a lot, and 3 mana for a tutor is a lot, right? These turns come down to like just the tiniest margins of mana, and especially the fact that Grim Tutor's double black, that really sells, or changes my opinion of it.
Yeah,
that's definitely rough.
That's basically the main reason why I don't run both Grim Tutor and Praetor's Grasp. It's just my personal preference to play Praetor's Grasp. Number one, as a sorcery speed extra way to go off, but also I just like the flexibility and using my opponent's cards as a way to leverage the way to win the game, or just leverage the way to get an advantage. For example, in a Cockatrice game I played, I think yesterday, my opponent who was playing Gitrog Monster Raiders grasped a food chain out of Tazri, played it, and he actually got to cast 2 discard outlets and 2 Gitrogs, and then went off through several pieces of interaction, which was very hilarious, but also, of course, not the most optimal way to go about it, but it was pretty hilarious. My point, summarizing my point on why I run, I don't run Grim Tutor, is that I just want to have a single sorcery speed 3 plus CMC tutor in the deck. I don't want to run both of those, and it's just personal preference due to the way I like to run Praetor's Grasp. But yeah,
I know, Keeb, you were thinking of Gerard's orders at one point, right? Was that just budget, or is that?
No, I actually like that card a lot. I feel like it has. I mean, it's similar to what do you call it? The enchantment.
Survival
of the fittest.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that. You can't split the cost over several turns, but it doesn't require you to have a starting creature to make it work.
Mm.
And I think it's pretty equivalent in terms of power. The thing is, in testing with other decks, what I've found is that it can be really potent to have one card wins, right? And that card by itself gets you all the stuff you need to win.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful, especially in that it can help you recover games when you've lost everything. Right? Like somehow you've lost several of your discard outlets, or Dakmore's gotten shuffled back in or something, like you had to shuffle it to save it.
Yeah.
Something like that, where a single card can go get you everything that you need back to be ready to win again. And the fact that it can get you your utility creatures as well. And even just putting dredgers into the yard it can be useful. Like it's not, I don't know, it has a lot of potential, I think. And I haven't done much testing with it yet, but it feels really strong.
Yeah, I could see the perspective where you're going with Gerard's orders. I've seen people, at least who are more on the reanimator side of things, that are not playing green, just going for Final Parting.
Final Parting is pretty similar. I think it's got potential too, but I mean the five mana is just so much.
Yeah, we don't need the 5 mana, right? We don't need the ability to tutor the non creatures, because we're just going to find our discard
outlet.
It is
nice,
and
right?
Yeah,
the 5 mana being able to get you things like Autumn's Veil, or other stuff like that, even like Cavern of Souls or something like that, if you need like a land drop and something to count it, right? Like there are situations where you'd much rather have the ability to get non-creatures.
But I think the beauty of
but the cost is pretty steep.
Yeah, the beauty of Gerard's orders is that it's like a surprise win out of nowhere, right? You find your discard outlet and then your Golgari Grave Troll, and you're just off to the races. Whereas I think Final Parting is definitely something where it makes it harder to achieve that, and you're definitely trying to set up over multiple turns, which gives your opponents time to find answers or win themselves.
Yeah, I really like that with Jared's orders. It's two black green, just win the game, right?
Yeah,
it gets you the Putrid Imp, and you can play that if you've already got Gitrog out, assuming, or you do it. Yeah, you could do it the turn before Gitrog, but that would be pretty telegraphing.
Now, I do think Survival is still markedly better than Gerard's orders.
Oh yeah, it's a much better card. But it's that same sort of effect of
exactly,
like single card that gets you all the stuff you need. Or if you've already got the stuff you need, can get you protection creatures or utility creatures or even mana creatures, right? You can go grab an Elvish Spirit Guide if you need that extra green to get there that turn.
Yeah, that's true.
And that makes it effectively a cheaper tutor for the Grave Troll.
Yeah, kind of like a Buried Alive.
I mean, it's still not as as good as the other effects of that type, right? Because it does cost 4 mana.
Yeah.
But the fact that it has that flexibility is kind of nice.
What have you thought about Sylvan Tutor and Leptis? I guess, what do you think about Sylvan Tutor?
It seems really slow to me, but we draw a lot of cards.
Personally, I have
it
no
certainly has
problems
potential.
with the card. I have no problems with the card personally. The fact that Gitrog can draw a card from the top of the deck so easily at sorcery speed, because you just play a fetch land and you draw the card you tutored for with Sylvan Tutor. It can basically be a 1 mana tutor into hand incidentally, just because you have so many ways to draw cards. And I like the card. I just haven't run it personally. I could easily run it in my deck. I just haven't gotten to the point of aggressively tutoring for Golgari Grave Troll in all of my games, but I'm in the process of adding Summoner's Pact for just that purpose. So yeah, I might add Sylvan Tutor in the future myself.
Yeah, so one thing I found with Sylvan Tutor is that there are times when I just kind of want to find like a value engine, like a Bob. Like if I've got as my only like turn 1 tutor, like I might just find a Bob if I think it's going to be a grindier game. Or sometimes you can find a Ramanap Excavator, or that sort of ability to grind and have versatility there is, I think, kind of what makes it playable. If it was just either tutor Grave Troll or discard outlet, I don't know if it would be good enough as is. I think it needs that little
one
bit
mana
extra.
cost is pretty good. Like there are so many turns where you get Rug down and you've got 2 mana up, and if you can Sylvan for Putrid Imp, crack a fetch, grab the Putrid Imp, and win. Like those. I find that I have so many turns where I'm just over the mana for Gitrog, so I can drop Gitrog and cast a 2-drop or cast 2 1-drops, and I have a couple draws I can get. So I usually hope to draw into something that I can do with that mana, some sort of tutor or something, and I feel like Sylvan is really good in that sort of situation. So I probably will test with it soon. It's another one. It's one that's been on my list of things to play with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've been playing with it for a bit, and it's definitely served its purpose a few times, but I've also been kind of underwhelmed by it in other circumstances. Top deck tutoring a Bob, if that's your best play, is not always where you want to be.
Yeah. The other one that I kind of like, and at least in the testing I've done with it has always been good, but I know a lot of other people in the community are quite against it, is the Traverse the Ulvenwald. I've found that I never really had any trouble turning it on, and then it was just a 1 mana to hand tutor for creatures, which always seemed to get there. I took it out a while back.
I never get the Delirium.
Yeah,
it's so hard. I find it to be hard.
Maybe it's just because I'm greeting so hard with my discarding all my stuff and playing everything out that I end up with half of my deck in my graveyard.
If you just discard your hand to your discard outlets just to turn. I mean, I guess it works. Yeah, if that's what you're trying to do.
That's
I have to say I have done that before.
Yeah, I haven't played with Traverse myself, but I'm gonna quote Razliox here, who has played with Traverse somewhat, and this is not a direct quote, but he has said several times that it's one of the worst viable land / creature tutors that you can run in the deck due to its conditional nature, but it's still one of the viable ones.
I see that.
It's something that you should definitely run in your budget builds if you can't afford.
Definitely budget.
In some of the more expensive cards.
So often the budget lists don't have as many artifacts. and so they have more trouble turning it on.
Yeah, and also like you might not be on all the fetches, or it might come on.
exactly.
You might need to get your Gitrog land triggers in order to have that turn on. So like it'd be like a later game tutor.
But that can totally work, right? I think I would run that before I would run Grim Tutor personally. But there's some other ones I want to test before I get down to that one.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe you should. Have you tested with Grim Tutor?
I have.
Okay, 'cause I've been in my testing. I've liked it.
Paying 3 mana for a tutor is just bad, man. It's not worth it.
It doesn't feel too bad. It doesn't feel too bad.
This is where
you're getting all this extra mana from.
Preference.
But when I cast a 5-drop and then have to tutor to cast a 1 or 2 drop,
dude, sometimes we just have it on turn 2. We have like no good turn 2 play if we don't have like Frog, and you've just got
But if you tutor on turn 2, then your opponents are like, hold on. We need to not let this Gitrog player do anything for the rest of the game because he has his win.
I guess, but I mean, it's like, do you hold your imp seals? I'll launch a turn 1 imp seal for like a crypt or something. Yeah,
it's
but
very
imp seal's different. Everybody expects you to imp seal turn 1.
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to deal with the expectations. Even Sun Tzu in the Art of War said that something along the lines of abuse your opponent's expectations and diffuse those expectations at the moment where you're going to strike. So turn 1 imp seal is such a usual play for many decks because they want their mana crypt or whatever. And even if you're going to get a combo piece with that imp seal, you usually just want to fire that off turn 1. But when you have a frog on field and you've already set up these pathways to victory, that imp seal is going to scream either deck more or a discard outlet, at which point you want to probably hold on to that imp seal. But I think we might want to move on because there's several other sections to still discuss.
We might have to hammer through these. Yeah. And then the last thing we were at in this section was like the Tainted Pack Plunge into Darkness, which is just from the Blitz stuff, and we've already discussed that.
Pretty much, you just have to be crazy to run those.
Yeah.
Or be on that double Titan list, and even then, you pretty much just have to be crazy to be running that list.
Exactly.
So, good luck to all you insane frogs out there. It's a lot of fun. I tested with that list. I like it a lot. I tested the Tainted Pact in the regular list, and it's crazy. It gets there, but sometimes you hoist yourself by your own petard. Yeah,
I had one, just a quick thing on Plunge. I had, and Double Titan, quick story. I cast Plunge into Darkness for 10, so I was still kind of playing around, testing with what the right amount to plunge for is, how aggressive to be, but I plunged for 10, picked up an Ad Nauseam off the plunge, cast Ad Nauseam, hit Ulamog off the second card, and then I still won that turn. So, Gitrog is an insane deck. Has a lot of reach.
Yeah. There was a game where I ad-naused from 6, and if the stupid Yisan player hadn't happened to have the only piece of interaction in that deck that got me the what do you call it, Beast Within, then I would have won off of the ad-naus for 6. ad-naus at 6 life.
Oh man,
yeah. If you can't take anything out of these stories, it's just that Gitrog is an insane deck. You can
never out of the game.
I think we can all agree on that.
Okay, so the next section, I guess, is additional protection. So I guess Efeno asks, how good has hand disruption been for you? Is it a standard include in every build now? No, I guess it's not standard because Leptys doesn't run
it. I think it should be standard.
I think so as well.
It's absolutely it's top tier cards for the list. Not only are you able to be proactive about trying to strip counterspells from people who you think are going to counter you on turns when you're trying to go off, but it also gives you a little bit better game against the decks that aren't necessarily faster, because very few decks are faster than Gitrog.
I mean,
but
take the Hulk or out of the Flash Hulk player's hand. But being able to take
the Hulk or the Flash out of the Flash Hulk player's hand, or similar decks to that have really early cards that will just win them the game.
So
you can be proactive about that, because as a green-black deck, we don't have a ton of interaction that stops a lot of the combos that people do, right? You know, if people are going for lab man combos, we've got a handful of removal spells that kill their lab man. But if they're doing Hulk stuff, if they're doing some of those other combos, we really just don't have a ton of interaction for that stuff.
And so it's the thought season duress that are standard, I think. That's you'll agree to that, right? So Inquisition is like the third piece that for me has come in and out of the deck a lot.
Yeah, and I think that can totally be a meta call. If Inquisition is good against the decks that you play against, if you need to be stripping the Flash player's hand at the beginning of every game, run another hand attack. Run the Inquisition because it is good. And, you know, most of the stuff in CDH is sub 3. So you're, if your opponent kept a hand that doesn't have something it hits, then I'm concerned for your opponent and their deck building skills.
And when it comes to Inquisition, and even if you don't hit something, usually the information that you get out of is very useful for you. For example, I've played a lot with Cabal Therapy in my other black lists, and while those have more synergy for the Cabal Therapy, as in you want to get something like a Leonin Relic Warder into your graveyard, it's still the information that you get by looking at somebody's hand and you not getting something is super useful. And it also is a very good, let's say, in quote, political play, in that you can divert attention away from you by letting everybody else see what a certain opponent that might be threatening to win has in their hand. So, they're incredible political manipulation tools. And the information, as you said, is just so useful. Even just knowing what your opponent has in their hand can tell you so much about what their lines are going to be for the next couple turns, how they're planning to interact with you, how well they'll be able to interact with your opponents if they try to go off. Like that stuff is so useful. If you find out that your opponent has one counter, then you can bait until your other opponent tries to go off and they counter it, and then you can go off right then, right? Like you can, it helps you so much with timing. It helps you so much with planning your turns out and not getting blown out by random stuff that your opponents happen to have. Yeah, it has
Unfortunately, we don't have too much other additional protection besides hand attack.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I
at
guess
least
Leptys...
proactive. When it comes to proactive protection against potentially faster decks. The fact that I'm the most conservative player here might actually come as a surprise that I'm the one who doesn't play these, because I should be the one who plays these hand attacks. And I've played with them, I've tested them, and I've just been able to abuse my attention politics so well that I've been able to divert attention away from me, or just get the control players or the blue players into each other's throats, that I can be the parasitic vegetable of a deck in the pod.
That makes sense.
Hand attacks are a substitute.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that, like, so how do you deal with, Flash players, and the fact that you can't be super conservative about them because they can just win out of nowhere just like we can. I mean, it's different once you've got Gitrog in play and you can flash in a crown and win in response to their stuff. But
that requires setting up.
Yeah, that requires setup. And if you're not hyper aggressive about that setup, those early turns, there's a lot of decks that can just win. If Gitrog is going slow, they just win, and we don't have a whole lot of ways to interact with them.
Yeah, it's basically the reason why I don't run those, and kind of have to sometimes fall to those Flash Halt decks, is because I don't run the hand attack, and I don't run into Hulk that much in my local metagame, where I primarily have played Gitrog for these past 2 years. There has been at least a couple games where there was a flash player, but then the player just disassembled the Breakfast Hulk deck and started playing something like a zombie. There's so much blue in our meta games, and Gitrog just thrives in that environment without any disruption whatsoever. But if there was a Flash Hulk player, or just some turbo super, well, there's a lot of turbo Nos in our meta game, but if there was somebody who just went into consistent turn 2, or even just turn 2.5 wins, I would probably just add in all of the cheap hand attack. The rest,
I can see in a meta that has a lot of counter spells. You can sort of count on the counterspell decks stopping other people's early wins. And there I could see the value of totally just, tutoring up the Life from the Loam, which is essentially an uncounterable engine, right? Every time I counter it, you can just dredge it back, and then just getting value off that, and eventually ending up with, Cavern of Souls and stuff like that, so that you can cast your stuff uncounterable and go off.
Just force through the win. Yeah,
protected.
It kind of comes down into my personality of just being patient. And the thing is that people who lose to Flash Hulk run out of patience in the macro meta very quickly and start playing the dispels and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, that's fine. This problem fixed itself. I'm gonna just keep playing Life from the Loam. Like that. And just playing the more quirky forms of interaction that are like removal spells.
Speaking of interaction, that's our next category. And in here we've got things listed like Beast Within, Natural State, Dismember, Dark Blast, and Emerald Charm. So
one of these,
obviously, notably, we're missing all the the pieces that are standard, like Abrupt Decay, Assassin Trophy. That's never coming out of the deck. Nature's Claim is never coming out. But these are things that do come in and out of the deck depending. Anyone have any interesting to say about these? We've got some spicy meatballs in here. So
I mean, Dismember is pretty strong. It gets rid of lots of stuff. I was running it until Assassin's Trophy came out. And when that came out, I just swapped those.
Same, yeah.
I feel like we have a good amount of stuff that deals with creatures, and I felt a little light on creature removal before Assassin's Trophy, which is why I put Dismember in. But now, I feel like we're at a good place there, so I don't really feel a need for more removal of that sort. Beast Within's a great removal piece, but I just can't stand paying 3 mana to remove stuff.
Same.
I may have a personal stigma against the 3 mana cost cards. I've cut almost all of them from my list.
You've cut Ramunap, which was bold. That was a bold one.
Yeah, I just don't play that game. I'm not grinding. I know I can win. I can just get back to a win without having to play Ramunap style games.
I'm off Ramunap in Blitz, and I haven't missed it too much. I think there's been one time where I kind of wished I could tutor for it. Even then, though, I'm not on in Blitz. I don't. This kind of actually blows my mind about your list, Leptys. Is you're very conservative. You're trying to get advantage off Loam, and you run Ramunap, and you're only on two of each basic. That seems kind of crazy.
That seems rough.
Let's say 2 of each basic. As to what your point was here.
I mean, I run out of fetchables with 2 of each basic sometimes.
Oh,
even without
yeah.
Yeah, we're on 3. I'm in 3 in my standard non-double Titan list.
Yeah, that's an absurd amount of basics.
3 of each basic is insane?
3 of each basic? Oh my gosh, so many basics.
You're on 3 of each basic.
What are you even going to do with those? Yeah, you're right. I did go back to that after I cut the Tainted Pact.
But you kept in your list. You kept 2 forests and a single snow-covered forest.
Yep.
Just for the memes, I guess.
I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to go back to 1 of each.
At any time, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't find you run out of fetchables, Leptys?
It has come up, I think, a couple of times, but not too many times. It's not something like increasing the amount of basics is not something that I have really thought about. this could be something that I could actually just adjust in my future iterations of the list. But so far, the greatest question when it comes to running 2 swamps or 2 basic swamps is the fact that do I run out of swamps to sack for Lake of the Dead? And that has been the primary argument as to why I should increase the amount of swamps in my list. But I usually just aggressively get all the swamps in the field as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
Just proactively in case I run Lake of the Dead. But yeah,
since we've moved into basic counts, I'm gonna say maybe there isn't too much more to say about interaction.
Wait. I do think we should talk about Dark Blast, but I
Dark Blast comes up a lot.
Personally, I want to personally plug Emerald Charm as one of the weird tech cards that nobody else likes, but I'm in love with. A lot of people run Natural State as another way to deal with sort of the stacks that people drop and try to ruin our day with.
Peace,
Yeah, and what I've found is that the most oppressive stacks that we care about is enchantment based, right? It's Rest in Peace, it's Leyline, it's Humility, it's stuff like that. And so I really liked finding a piece that hit that side of the stacks, because I feel like a lot of the artifact stacks, there is some, but mostly it's Curse Totem, and we can get around that with our discard outlets.
That's true.
We've got End Step Sculpt to get around that, or we've got Chains of Mephistopheles, or if you're really brave, Chain of Smog.
Yeah.
But we have ways around most of the artifact stacks that people run, and so that I haven't found that artifact stacks is a place where I'm like, oh man, I wish I had another way to remove that. But enchantments, we only have a few ways that we can deal with enchantments, right? And so I wanted another piece that dealt with that. But there are some games where nobody has the stacks. There's some games that everybody's just trying to do their win. And you don't need to deal with any stacks. And I think Emerald Charm really shines because it gives you the ability to utilize it as a ramp piece instead of as a stacks removal piece in situations where you don't need to remove any stacks. It also deals with a couple of win con things that people do. I mean, I know nobody's playing Kiki nonsense anymore with the
Blood Pot, I guess, does sometimes.
Yeah, but they don't. Do most of those lists even run the enchantment form? I don't know. Maybe they do, but it hits that. It also hits Food Chain. It hits other random stuff like what do you call it? Like Fish and Ristic Study and other annoying pieces like that. It hits. I know people have been trying to jam that what's the suppression field, other random little enchantments that like can really make make us have a bad time. And on top of that, every now and then you can get people swinging in with their Aven Mind Sensors, or Kess or Zur into your Gitrog, or with Mind Sensor even into your Dorks. Nobody sees that coming.
And we're definitely a big target for attacks. Exactly. Unless we're probably top priority unless there's a Shimmer Zur at the table. Mm-hmm. That's the only other deck that I think takes priority over us.
Yeah. And so there people are always attacking us, and they never expect us to be able to block flyers. And so Emerald Charm can randomly be creature removal as well in that sense. And you can even do it when other people are being attacked, because you can offer them the block to kill stacks pieces that they want to get rid of as well. I mean, pretty much everybody who doesn't have an Aven Mind Sensor wants the Aven Mind Sensor dead. So you can usually get some help taking that thing down.
So
I think it's an all around really powerful card, and I've been very happy with it ever since I added it to the list, and I recommend everybody at the very least try it out, see what you think of it.
I'll test with it. But it's sure.
I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. I think the first people who tried it were in the Selvala deck, they were trying that as like an untapper or removal spell, but the stuff that they need to remove, it just doesn't match the profile of Emerald Charm very well. So then it was just a mediocre untapper, and so I think a lot of people formed a bad opinion of it there, and there just really isn't any other deck that I think it's good in.
I'll give my quick counter argument to Emerald Charm. I will test with it, but I'll give my quick counter argument so we can talk about Dark Blast and then move on. One, I think that the fact that Natural State hits artifacts, I mean, obviously we can play around Curse Totem, but Isochron Scepter, Dramatic Reversal is a very popular win con, and the ability to remove that is huge. Same, like if you've got a Shimmer Zer, being able to answer Shimmer or stuff like that is pretty big. Then also being able to remove Null Rod, because we actually sometimes we do need we are pretty deep in artifacts, especially with we're something like 9 artifacts now, and we're one of the outside of blue decks that have no green. We're super deep in artifacts, probably the deepest out of any other, like I said, the non-green decks. And then also the untap ability is going to be sort of mediocre in the sense that think about Soul Ring or Mana Crypt is where you're trying, like, first of all, you need to be able to, in order to net mana and use it as ritual, you need to have something that taps for at least 2, which, happens with Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, lots of other effects, but the thing is if you've got Soul Ring in play, you're converting a green mana into 2 colorless mana, which you can't really utilize super well, because Gitrog requires 3 colorless mana, right? So if you're just trying to use it to accelerate into Gitrog, you're kind of wasting a mana there.
But it's
same
usually
with
Gitrog plus a ritual. I mean, Gitrog plus a tutor, which usually costs 1, or some other thing.
Yeah.
You usually can use it. I haven't ever been like, oh man, I have too much colorless mana, I wish I could not have it. But the fact that it costs a green is a downside. The fact that you're trading away a colored for probably colorless mana can't hurt you.
Okay, cool.
But I just like the upside of the potential ritual if you don't need the removal, because some games you just don't need any removal. You just want to go faster.
Yeah, I'll test with it for sure. I'm still skeptical, but yeah. So let's talk about Dark Blast, which is every time it gets mentioned on the Discord, people get up in arms. Everyone picks sides. It's really contentious. Some people absolutely hate it. It's like, why would I ever play Dark Blast? Some people are in love with it. Like, how could you even run this deck without Dark Blast? So I'll give a quick summary of like the importance of Dark Blast. So if you are seeing Spirit of the Labyrinth in your meta at all, you need to run Dark Blast. Like, just no question. That's a stacks piece that, Dark Blast is good enough that you can see value, and you just don't want to auto lose to Spirit of the Labyrinth, because Spirit of the Labyrinth, you can replace your draws with dredges, which is fine, but the moment you go to convert it into a draw, you get stonewalled, and it shuts off your dredges as well. So you need to have the Dark Blast in there so you can dredge the Dark Blast, kill the Spirit of the Labyrinth, and keep going. But Dark Blast obviously also hits Even Mind Sensor, Notion Thief. Those are the big ones that it hits. And you can recur it, obviously, to hit things that are 2 toughness, so kills your Timnas, kills your Labmen, whatnot.
To the draw.
But also the benefits are that it's just a card with dredge, which is nice. Yeah.
Which are functional copies of Dakmor, assuming you have enough draw triggers to feed it, as well as a discard outlet.
Yeah, if you've got something like Safekeeper in play, you're going to get to Dakmor with Dark Blast.
Yeah,
you're so likely to.
Or just getting a Golgari Grave Troll, which then in turn gets the Dakmor.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, there is something to be said to having a higher density of dredgers. I will admit it. I was crazy at one point. I had a lapse of sanity, and I cut Life from the Loam for a brief period of time before I realized that it turns out dredgers are actually pretty good in this deck.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, I've actually
double crazy.
I went on a cutting spree where I cut everything that wasn't actively getting me to a turn 2 Gitrog plus a discard outlet win.
Yeah, but Life from the Loam is pretty much just also a discard outlet, because you get to your hand size so easily.
as it turns out, that's what I figured out after having cut it for a while. I did miss it.
Yeah, it's the dredge cards are probably the biggest like package that I missed when I cut it myself as well. Believe it or not, I've played without Loam and without Dark Blast for a time. It was a very short while, but then I realized that even Dark Blast has through the test withstood the test of time and been re-included after I cut it. So it has been just universally good, at least from my experience.
Yeah. We can hammer through the next section real quick.
Yeah, I'll just sort of call them out, and then we'll get an opinion, and then if anyone wants to disagree, we can do that really quick. So this is Meta Tech and Hate. We'll start with Grafdigger's Cage. I don't have strong feelings for or against.
Anti-Yisan, anti-Hulk, anti-Kess, sort of. Pretty good. Only include based off your meta.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's Hulk
against it. So I highly recommend not putting it in your deck as someone who plays both Kess and Ultra. Next up is Scoobs. Scavenging news for those of you who spend most time on the internet.
Anti-Gitrog hate. If you're worried about the mirror, it's pretty good.
Yeah, but even then, I don't know. I can't see including Scoos. I can't imagine a meta where I would put Scoos in. But
yeah, it's too mana intensive. You want to.
It costs so much mana, and it just doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, fair.
It sort of helps, but it like you have to hold up mana, and it costs mana, and like it's not. I don't know. It's just so I find it's incredibly easy for me to play around Scoos.
The next card I think is probably better than Scoos in general.
Next card is Extirpate.
I think this is hot tech. If you're trying to, so people have run Fairy Macabre in the past to play around Abolisher stuff with Breakfast, and also we've run stuff like Scavenger Grounds, but with things like Shuffle, being able to play around single target Grave Hate, much like we can, those things don't get there anymore. You're really only targeting Razakats because other Gitrog decks are going to play around it, whereas I think Extirpate is some dank tech where it can just kill other Gitrog players. Can also hate out Hulk decks depending on if they're on Abolisher piles or not, or if they can assemble their Abolisher piles.
Yeah, if you run against Reanimation or just Grave-based decks a lot, which there's plenty of in the current metagame, you could run Extirpate as one of your interaction spells.
Okay, on the similar Grave Hate theme, Leyline of the Void.
I don't like Leyline. It's too dependent. Too much. You just never. It's not likely you're going to get it. You're not going to mulligan for it, and it's not likely you're going to get it in your opener. So it's just going to be 4 mana.
Yeah, it's a card that I run as Hulk plus Razaketh Hate in the past, but that was mainly because I didn't run Grafdigger's Cage, which in turn wasn't included because I run Necromancy as well as.
That's true.
Basically.
Getting off of the Necromancy lines lets you open up Graft Cage as an option, which is just 1 mana versus 4 is such a huge difference that. It's tough to make the argument for Leyline. Unless you just have Godly Luck and always have Leyline in your opener.
Yeah, a quick shout out to Fairy Macabre as a way to also get around the Grand Abolisher Hulk piles, which we discussed earlier though.
Though, as it was mentioned with the Shuffle Hulk, if they play it right, they're still safe because they can dodge that with the Memory's Journey.
Also, I think new Hulk, Breakfast Hulk can actually play around Macabre. If I'm
the Shuffle Hulk can at least.
Or new no, that's right. New Breakfast wouldn't be able to unless they had a draw ability to like save their stuff. But so Shuffle's the main one there.
Okay, next up is Pernicious Deed.
I think I'm the only one who's really done Pernicious Deed. I know, well, besides like the original list, which ran Pernicious Deed, I think I'm the main champion of this card. I ran it in when I was in a Staxier meta, and it did wonders. It's a really strong card to just always be able to threaten. So many decks are just they're dead to Pernicious Deed. Like so they'll be trying to force you to crack it all the time. It's the best card to like tutor as an out to multiple stacks pieces. Yeah, all around fine, but only run in the right meta. You know, and instantly off of, I'll just jump off of this. I think Keeb, you're also off Deluge, right?
Yeah, I think I cut it in my most recent list.
Yeah, so this is more like meta. This is like a meta tech sort of like Deluge. Obviously, is a super strong card, but we're being a green deck. We're super reliant on dorks, and unless you're trying to clear stuff like insane Timna boards or Yasan or something like that, then you're better off just trying to win the game.
If your opponents are all playing stupid, stacksy creature decks, Deluge is amazing. If your opponents are all playing stupid stacksy artifact enchantment decks, Pernicious Deed is the solution there. They're both great role players, but in a standard list into the average meta right now, I think they're just not worth it. But we have better options.
Yeah, if you run
3 drops, man.
Yeah, Toxic Deluge is like I cannot praise the card enough against creature strats like Yusan and stuff. Not having Deluge in your deck is gonna be full on panic mode when you go up against those decks. But if there's no like all in creature or just hate bear kinds of decks around, then definitely it's a flex slot in that case.
Yeah, that's mostly just because you're going too slow, man. You gotta win faster. Yeah. People don't have time. People don't have time to play their creatures.
And then kind of on this board wipe, sort of this mass wipe effect, we've got Seeds of Innocence, which is kind of like decks that run Pyroclasm, where you're just trying to get that massive tempo advantage of wiping all the non-green decks artifacts. But I think right now there's just not enough non-green decks. Everyone's on green because it's super good.
Yeah. See, also as one of the biggest players of Seeds, I think out of us 3, is the fact that it was basically the Pernicious Deed of my deck. In the fact that it was mainly to get rid of artifact stacks pieces, while also being as a plan B, as a tempo play against all the artifact ramp that your opponents might play. But if you don't play against stacks, then definitely cut Seeds of Innocence, because it's not that good as a tempo play only.
But if you're against 3 decks that are each playing artifact stacks, or even just 2 decks that are dumping several artifact stacks each, then like having your single Nature's Claim just isn't going to get there. You're gonna want to have an option.
If you're playing against the Fairy and mono black CDC all the time, then sure, play Seeds of Innocence.
Yeah, go for it. Seems great there.
Honestly, if you're trying to make this as broad into a blank meta as possible, if you're not sure whether or not you want to put in Deluge or Seeds of Innocence or something, I think Pernicious Deed is kind of just you can jam that all around if you really need to.
If you expect a bunch of stacks.
Well,
the only problem with Pernicious is that it costs a lot.
Yes.
Right? It's 3 to play and 2 to activate. Right?
Or no, it's X to activate.
X to activate? Okay.
Yeah, so like if you're trying to wipe 3, like six is what you'll usually pay, something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Man, it's been a while since I played that card.
Yeah, and then our final card
played that card when I was in like 7th grade.
Oh wow!
And our final card is Null Rod.
Yeah, Leptys, you still main deck Null Rod?
Yes, we are a green-black deck, so we run Null Rod. That's it.
I disagree.
It's a simple formula.
It is simple formula. You play green, you play black.
We run. How many other green-black decks are running LED? Like, come on.
Hey, I am me.
Yeah, it's William Muldrow. That doesn't count. You guys are doing combos with it.
It also has a Null Rod in it.
Really?
Yes.
How many? I guess you're like LEDs like your main combo piece, but Gitrog runs more artifacts than Muldrotha does for sure. Like more, like we're running everything. More artifact that taps for mana.
Maybe.
Like Chromox. Yeah, where's my list? I'm looking at Razliox's list. I'm like, I was about to say Everflowing Chalice. I'm like, wait a second, that's not right. Yeah, so Chrome Mox, Grim Monolith, LED, Lotus Petal, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, Mox Diamond.
That's 8.
I think
right?
I cut Chrome Mox, but that's mostly just because I don't like that card. But I want all the other ones.
You're right. Okay. And Null Rod. I think that's wrong. But I guess you're more of a stacks deck. We're not a stacks
It's certainly more of a stack deck, yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
thing. Gitrog is not a stacks deck, and I think pretending to be is a bad plan. You got to go fast. You're not trying to slow things down. You don't want to slow things down.
Yeah. In
you're
all
fine
serious,
if the
in all
other stack decks
seriousness,
slowed down.
of including the null rod, it's definitely a flex slot that is easily replaced by any other form of interaction. It's just the fact that it has been so far, in my experience, it has just been the most universal form of hate that you can easily play around because you play green and you play the black rituals, and even though the 7 must-have artifacts in your deck of fast mana are out of order, again with the conservative way of just valuing through the opposition with lands, exploration effects, mana dorks, and all the green and black ramp that you get. It's not a hindrance, like at least let's say 85% of the time. But yeah, it's definitely a flex slot and can be cut for other forms of interaction.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to ramp. And there's only a few cards here. Hopefully we can get them done pretty quickly. So first up is Somberwald Sage.
Okay, so actually these kind of I think it's actually better to start with Lotus Cobra, because this is one where we're sort of this one has kind of been cut from most of our lists, so that's kind of just, we can quickly talk about that, and then because Somberwald kind of goes together with Jiraga Tree Speaker, but we'll talk about those together. So just briefly with Lotus Cobra, I found it just was not consistent enough, and it was kind of a dead draw later in the game. And so I cut it for more consistent.
And costing 2 mana.
Yeah. I mean, 2 mana. I don't understand, man. 2 mana is not super. It's not a lot of mana.
It's not, but when it doesn't guarantee that it produces mana. It's like a 2 mana dork that, sometimes has a bigger upside.
Yeah.
But is not even guaranteed to be a mana every turn.
I think
right?
most,
sometimes you run out of lands.
Most cuts are for Wall of Roots, right? We kind of switched to Wall of Roots over that.
I can't remember if I put Wall of Roots.
Yeah, it's basically, at least I cut Cobra for Wall of Roots, but Cobra is probably the most cut and re-added card in the history of my list. I've cut it like 7 times. Yeah, I've cut it like 7 times and re-added it like 7 times or 6 times. And yeah, it's in short, it's usually mana neutral. You play it, then you play a fetch land, and you're back into the 2 mana, and it makes stuff like early game plays. It's just, you just play Lotus Cobra and the card that you were gonna play anyway. With fetch lands at least. And also the other part where it actually becomes super good is when you play Nose. Yeah. And in Ad Nauseam, it's a tremendous amount of mana fixing as well as mana ramp, because it's mana neutral, and because it allows all these exploration effects become, and fetch lands becoming just black lotuses, and that's where it shines.
I'll kind of jump off that too. With I kind of cut Cobra for the same reason I cut Exploration, which is that Cobra is good with land heavy, like Exploration is good with land heavy hands, where you're not kind of just going, turn 1 land dork, turn 2 if you're going like, if you, most of the time you wouldn't keep a 4 land hand, because you're not, unless you have like absolutely just gas cards for your last 3 and like some insane ramp. Right, so most of the time you're going to be on 3 lands, and
I keep a lot of 2 land hands too.
Yeah, 2 land hands are pretty keepable often, and then those cards just lose all their value, and then they only become good like with Nas. So I'd much rather just have like consistent ramp. It's kind of what I felt about it.
That's sort of where I am with them as well.
Lotus Cobra,
okay.
in short,
But again,
explosive.
if you're tutoring Life from the Loam every game, and you've got 1 million fetch lands, then Exploration and Lotus Cobra can be crazy good.
Well, that's
right?
true.
That's a completely different game, right?
Yep.
So I think that comes down to playstyle.
Leptys, did you want to say something about it, or?
Just in short, very explosive mana source, but not a consistent one, especially when your playstyle is not keeping up with the land drops, but just going through to the win as fast as possible.
Okay, and then our last two cards we can kind of bundle together is Somberwald Sage and Derogatory Speaker. So this started with Kiebitzen. You were testing with Basalt and Mesmeric Orb as like an alternate win con, and you ended up cutting Mesmeric Orb and kept Basalt, and I was like, what the heck?
Yeah, so I tested Basalt Mesmeric as an alternate way to win, or to essentially loop without having to deal with or to get around creature hate, stuff that would deal with your creatures, and it wasn't bad. It just was sort of almost distracting. Like trying to go for that line meant that you weren't getting the pieces that you needed for the normal lines, and so then if you got stopped, you were stuck with one piece or the other. I mean, if you untap with Mesmeric Orb in play, you are a very happy Frog player. If you untap with Gitrog and Mesmeric Orb out, you're a very happy Frog player. But sort of getting to that state is pretty uncommon. It's so telegraphed that everybody's just like, okay, time to blow up the artifact or blow up the Gitrog. In which case, then you're just milling for no value. Which, sometimes you hit useful stuff. Sometimes you hit your Life from the Loam or something else.
Yeah, but you ended up keeping the Basalt after cutting Mesmeric.
But I kept Basalt because I found that I really liked how often it gave me the turn 3 Gitrog with my land drops still available. And so the key was I found that I had a ton of hands where I would play a turn 1 Dork and play a turn 2 Basalt Monolith. And then after that, on turn 3, I would have 6 mana available from the start. Play Gitrog with a mana up, in case I need to cast some hand hate first or something like that. But then after I play Gitrog, I still have both of my land drops, which means I can save those fetch lands till after Gitrog's in play. I can save the utility lands or like the sack lands or whatever, and get draws off of those, and it seemed to really increase the number of those turn 3 Gitrogs that also converted into the turn 3 win. The deck is incredibly good at dropping Gitrog turn 3, but oftentimes you'll drop Gitrog turn 3 and be out of mana.
Yeah,
or
2 mana tight to get your
your
tutor and get your thing into play.
Right, like you can play your land after Gitrog, but then that's it. Like maybe you get a draw off that land, but then you're stuck. You've got 1 mana. You use that mana to tutor, but then you've got your Gitrog in play, and they know you've tutored, so you're stuck.
Yeah. So
but
then,
if you have the ability to have 2 mana after your Gitrog, or potentially even more, the chances of you being able to get the discard outlet into play seem to go up a lot, and so that's why I kept Basalt in, was to facilitate those sort of hands that really go for that turn 3 win, not just the turn 3 Gitrog.
Yeah, so we a lot of us on the Frogs were clued into like the strength of what Kiebitzen was saying with Basalt, and then it might have been me or someone else who pointed out that like, because I think if it was me, I think it was because I was thinking about Momir Vig running Somberwald Sage, and I was like, I mean, Somberwald Sage just seems to fit the bill kind of a bit better, where you're not having to rebuy that effect by banking 3 more mana, so it's not like turn 3 you have lots of mana,
much less one-time use.
Yeah, and so Somberwald Sage definitely took off in popularity. Lots of people like that in testing. And then something that got suggested recently, I forget who, but it was Gitrog Tree Speaker. And that's something I've been testing a lot recently, and it's been very, very good. Because Somberwald Sage requires, the turn 1 Dork into turn 2 Somberwald. And then, whereas Gitrog Tree Speaker is turn 1 Tree Speaker, turn 2 you get access, you essentially turning it on, and you get access to the mana that turn, which then gives you on its own turn 3 Frog, or, one of the big advantages over Somberwald is that you can also use that mana for ad nauseam if you were trying to do that.
And it doesn't get you to 6 like Somberwald does, but you don't really need to be at 6. It's nice to have 6, but not required by any means.
Well, because also if you have it will get you to 6 in the sense that if you have, or it will get you higher, depending if you use the mana that when you're pumping in the level up. If you're going to use that to develop dorks as well.
True.
Which Somberwald already requires you to have a dork in order to get that into play on turn 2.
Exactly. Yeah,
so I like Tree Speaker. I could see lists in the future running both Tree Speaker and Somberwald just because of the power of that effect. But it might just be that you only want one of that effect, in which case I'm liking Tree Speaker. Could still be Somberwald, though.
Yeah, I'm definitely planning to test with that.
Yeah, and then our very last thing that I think we'll talk about is cycling lands, which is, I think they were necessary in the past to do sorcery speed loops, and then Bio came up with his 13 land pile or something like that. I forget what it is exactly, but it's a loop that lets you do things at sorcery speed that's shortcuttable, and that doesn't require the cycling lands.
Mm-hmm.
And so then outside of that, I think they're just tap lands that aren't super great or bad cantrips.
Yeah, if you think of them as non-lands, because you really don't want to play them as tap lands. It's just, we all know how tap lands are. They're not great.
Yeah.
But if you think of them as bad non-lands, or as like cantrips that are non-lands, that get better once you have Gitrog, right? Cycling for 1 and getting 2 is pretty nice, but the deck really doesn't need more stuff that is good once you've got Gitrog in play. Pretty much once you've got Gitrog in play, everything is good. Like, all the things you do are really busted.
Yeah.
You put so many lands into your graveyard, you get so many draws, and paying extra mana for those draws and just paying mana to just draw is pretty underwhelming. Again, if you go for that slow style with Life from the Loam, that's a different story. Because then you can get huge value out of them.
Yeah.
By repeatedly using them. But outside of that, they just don't really do enough to merit inclusion in at least the style of list that I play, the fast, super like aggressive combo style.
Okay, so I think that wraps up our single card discussion portion. We're going to move into the section we're titling Would You Mulligan? And so we have 3 sort of interesting hands that we're going to go through and consider maybe why you would or wouldn't mulligan or how you'd play them. We're going to try and do that nice quickly. We'll try and have a way that these hands can be visually displayed when we post the podcast, but for now I will just read them out. So the first hand consists of Gaia's Cradle, Gemstone Caverns, Worldly Tutor, Reign of Filth, Noose Constrictor, Sylvan Safekeeper, and Life from the Loam.
Okay, so I guess just quick off the bat, keep or mulligan? Jump in wherever you guys. I'm thinking about this for a sec.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'm not sure.
I think this looks like a keep. Because you've got obviously if you're not going first, you've got the Gemstone Caverns that's coming into play turn 1, and then you can, right off the bat, you could Worldly in upkeep. I don't even know if you'd want to do that, though. You'd probably want to go Gemstone Caverns, play your Safekeeper, play your Cradle, tap the Cradle, play the Worldly. And that could set you up kind of nice.
Yeah, but if you have Gemstone Caverns in the field with a luck counter, you can just play Worldly Tutor before your first turn even begins.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, so then you could...
True.
What do you... If you find something like you could do a Tree Speaker turn. If you find Tree Speaker, then you've got Gemstone. So you before you turn your worldly for Tree Speaker, draw the Tree Speaker. Then you go Gemstone, tap that for your Safekeeper. Play your Cradle, tap the Cradle for the Jiraga, and then that could set you up for a turn 3 Gitrog, and you've already got your. We should establish we're probably hitting the Rain of Filth, right, with the caverns.
That's what I would hit probably.
Yeah.
Because the Life from the Loam can be the Dakmor Tutor, and you've got the News Constrictor, and the other stuff you want to keep.
Well, then also you've got your Safekeeper, right? So you'll get your Gitrog into play on turn 3 with
turn 2, right?
No, because you can't pump the Jiraga.
Can't pump it first. Yeah, so you need an extra turn.
So you get your turn 3 Gitrog, and then you can sack your lands, and then you can use your Loam to just start generating advantage with the Safekeeper.
Yeah, a good rule of thumb is when you have a card with Dredge 3, you want 3 draw triggers to have around a 70% chance of getting Dakmor.
Got it. That's a good rule of thumb.
So what you want is if you get at least one more land from the draws that you get, you can sack all of those 3 lands to Sylvan Safekeeper and have a 70% chance of digging into Dakmor with just by dredging, discarding a dredging Life from the Loam with the Dredge Tutor line.
I think
and
the key thing to
of note is that you can, if you even if you don't get those lands, what you can do is you can float mana from the lands before you sack them, and then cast Life from the Loam. Like cast it first and get the lands back and replay them.
Yeah. Especially because you've got your Noose Constrictor, Safekeeper. You're gonna have Gitrog, and if you're tutoring Jiraga, your Cradle is tapping for a lot of mana. So it's easily paying for the Life from the Loam again. I think the key takeaway before we move on to the next hand, the key takeaway from this hand is your land tight hands, and you can, they're still playable. You've just got to look for a line, and sometimes that line was using your Worldly Tutor for early ramp, because sometimes people save their Worldly Tutors for combo pieces. Someone might look at this hand and be like, oh, my Worldly is going to have to be Golgari Grave Troll, right, to complete the combo here. But
or even like a backup discard outlet.
Yeah.
If you're worried that the first one gets blown up or something like that.
Or Bob would be far too slow in this kind of hand, I think. But that's something that people might think to do.
Yeah. Also, a good point about this is that if you're going first with a Gemstone Caverns in your hand, you probably want to mulligan.
You just
yes.
Just mull it. This hand is garbage if you're going first.
So check that box first before keeping this hand.
Yeah. Next hand, please.
The next hand is a Bayou, and then Boreal Druid, Priest of Titania, and Putrid Imp, and then Autumn's Veil, Summoner's Pact, and Sylvan Tutor. So, first off, keep or mulligan?
I think keep, but this one's tough. It's a one-lander, and you're, very vulnerable.
Kiebitzen and Leptys, keep or mulligan?
This is a very difficult keep, I would say.
It's tough to say no to a hand that has protection, your discard outlet, and a tutor for your Golgari Grave Troll. The only thing that's hampering this hand is mana. So if you can, the right call with this hand is to just luck sack into drawing lands.
Yep.
or like other ramp. Like if you,
I would mulligan this probably just because of the.
I would probably mulligan this.
Just because I don't want to rely on
the line that I see is you start with Boreal Druid, and then turn 2 you play Priest of Titania.
Yeah, and then if you hit a land, you've got.
If you hit a land, you also have your Sylvan Tutor for something else. If you hit that land, you can get, you can go get another ramp.
And the thing is also, if you're playing against other green decks, you're likely going to get Gitrog. Now the dangerous thing there is obviously that if you lose Gitrog could die if you don't hit lands, because you've got your one Bayou that gets you. But at that point, you're like 4 cards deeper. Yeah. So you should expect it. And then also if you've got Ramonap in your deck, then you can sort of get by off that, and because you've got the tutors to get there, and you've got
There's
double
also
tutors, so it's kind of redundant.
There's also tempting.
Yeah, there's also the dilemma of opposing interaction and how aggressively are they gonna interact with your turn 1 and turn 2 ramp pieces. If you don't get any lands from the top of your deck, you're in a very tight situation. If somebody mental missteps your Boreal Druid or
oh god, yeah,
gets rid of your Priest
garbage.
of Titania, then the hand becomes garbage. So it's good to take a look at how much people in your table are gonna eye your board position or your board state and stuff like that.
So
but yeah, I would.
So if you're in a table where people are afraid enough of your Gitrog deck that they're mental misstepping Boreal Druids, I think you might want to find a new table.
Yeah, you're probably not winning any of those games.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, if you missed your turn 2 land drop and played a Priest of Titania, as someone who plays maybe more removal heavy and interactive decks, if I could kill that Priest of Titania, I certainly would.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
So that's the big risk. You really need a land in those first 2 draws.
Well,
and I think for that reason, I would.
You could protect your priest. Like, I mean, it's desperate.
That's true.
It's desperate, but you could always Summoner's Pact for ESG and then cast your Autumn's Veil. Because you will be able to pay for it with your priest.
Kill your priest and
that's where
lose
all of the interaction is coming your way in response to that.
That's the kind of play I would make. I'd be like, no, fuck it, I'm going.
What a baller. Okay, we're done.
Yeah, so this one's definitely tough, but there is, I think from, I guess the takeaway from this is look at your lines and what you need to draw off the top to make it good and playable, because this is so tempting. Hands obviously are going to be tempting that have low land counts because your hand's just going to be full of gas.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and our last hand is Command Beacon, Marsh Flats, Mana Crypt, Elvish Spirit Guide, Worldly Tutor, Autumn's Veil, and Culling the Weak. So you got 2 lands and a crypt and a spirit guide, but so keeper mulligan. Let's start with Kiebitzen this time.
Well, so with Mana Crypt, 2 lands, and an ESG, that's a turn 2 frog.
All right.
And then you've got a tutor, and you've got protection, but you don't really have mana to use the protection if you're going for the turn 2 frog, and you don't really have anything to use the Calling the Weak on, so that's essentially a null card. This is a tough hand again. I think
you're also
I
color
would probably
screwed,
keep this.
You're color screwed off so you have to use your ESG for your green.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, you get a Bayou.
You do get the Bayou. You get the Bayou so that you'll be able to do the Worldly Tutor and then also cast the Gitrog off the ESG. But like, it's not great.
Yeah, this is the interesting hand where you can do the turn 1 or end step get Ramunap with Worldly Tutor, and then you can play turn 2 Ramunap with the Mana Crypt mana, and then you have a fetch land in your grave.
Ramunap.
You could, but I mean, you're not getting the value off it, so you'd waste your ESG.
Yeah, but
yeah.
But basically, I would probably just end step Ramunap Excavator here and start grinding with the fetch land that you have. But then again, that's just me, and it could. I think I would just keep this just on the fact that you have your colors at least, even if it's just one colored source. And then you have a Mana Crypt and a Worldly Tutor to bring you more colored sources if you don't draw into more colored sources.
Yeah, this is a hand where, having been on and taken it, been on in Ramunap and taken it out depending on my build. This is a hand where I certainly hope I'm running Ramunap at the time, because it gives you that initial grind and just massive value to find off your Worldly Tutor. I guess if you're not on Ramunap, you could consider getting Bob, but it's not.
But but then it's very very contextual based on the table and the matchups you're up against.
Yeah.
You have to be relying on the opponent's interaction to stop early game combo attempts. So
Yeah,
that's one thing about it is there's no interaction. Though that's been the same with all the previous hands as well.
Yeah, just protection with Autumn's Veil and just gas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
usually,
I think I'd probably keep this hand even in a deck without ramming up, and I would consider just going for the turn 2 Gitrog and trying to draw it out of it.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty greedy.
So. Well, what would you worldly for in that case?
I would save worldly until after the Gitrog, I think.
I guess that gives you the option to find a Somber Wald or something to rebuild in case Gitrog gets captured.
Yeah. Or get the discard outlet.
Yeah.
If I find other stuff, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
And then you can hold up mana for Autumn's Veil too if people try to remove it on your upkeep or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Would you? Yeah, so actually, just quick question: would you? Are you always going for turn 2 Frog here, or do you ever play it safe for turn 3 Frog with Autumn's Veil backup? If you draw land, if you hit the land.
It depends on the table, right? If somebody's holding up their double blue and a thing, yeah, maybe I wait for the Autumn Veil. But if everybody's tapping out for their dorks or signets.
Yeah, then you just want to get Gitrog in play, start getting that value.
And are not giving you the I'm gonna force of will your frog look.
Yeah.
Yeah, if people are giving you that look, hold up, wait for the Autumn Veil. And it is pretty dependent on what you draw those first couple turns, right? If turn 1 and turn 2 you draw some certain things, that could very much change what you're doing.
Yeah.
It is a little rough that Culling the Weak is essentially not in this hand.
Yeah.
Because we're so creature-light.
Yeah, but if you draw a creature like a dork or something, then it's easy turn 3 frog if your first frog gets... or if you're random.
Wait. If you draw a land off the top, that's a colored source. You can go turn 1, mana crypt, play your green source, play ESG, so that you can hold up your turn 2 frog with Autumn's Veil backup using the Culling the Weak.
Yeah, I thought about that line.
That's funny.
It just seemed pretty bad.
Yeah, burning your ESG and culling. Yeah.
But tempting.
Yeah, that's gonna draw a lot of attention.
For
better or worse.
If your opponents are giving you that, I'm gonna force a will your frog look. It might be the right play.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Okay.
So I think our next section we can kind of do fairly quickly. There's just a few things I want to point out.
This section is about piloting advice, and we'll just give each of our contributors just a couple minutes to say anything that they would give as advice during piloting. So let's start with Nugent.
Yeah, some things that aren't necessarily super intuitive, or some things you like. One of the things you might try to get away with early on when you're piloting frog is your first fetch you'll go find a bayou, and then your second fetch you'll try to find your overgrown tomb. That's kind of iffy. You don't necessarily want to do that. You want to you can screw yourself off of your later fetches being able to find colors, because if you're going Gitrog and then you're going to fold it up with a fetch from your additional land play, and you don't know, you could draw a nice tutor or something that you really want to cast, or something that you just really want to cast, not necessarily a tutor. So you want that ability to find your overgrown tomb after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so saving your overgrown tomb to be fetched later. Obviously, your first fetch is going to be Bayou 99% of the time.
It depends what else is in your hand. I sometimes save the Bayou as well, right? And in some metas, if you're worried at all about Blood Moon and that kind of thing.
Oh, that's true.
Or back to basics. Sometimes right? If you know what's in your hand and you can get away with not having to search up your Bayou early, or your overgrown tomb, it can be really beneficial to not get them. But you have to judge if you're going to run into a situation where you wish you had it.
It's also important to establish
that just requires some
your swamps
planning
too, for
sequencing.
Lake of the
Yeah.
Dead.
Yeah.
Generally prioritize swamps over forests.
Mm-hmm.
One thing on here we have is aggressive versus conservative play. We've covered this probably to death in this podcast, where you can actually play Frog in a bunch of different ways. You know, it just has that reach. You're not going to get punished for playing greedy or for playing greedy too much. You know, because Frog can just go fast and you can force your opponents to have it, or you can play conservatively and take advantage of Gitrog's insane grindability. Like,
I mean, I do whiff sometimes and get stopped, but it's pretty good about building back after that. And as a consequence of playing super aggressive, I've won a lot of games that I had absolutely no business winning. Just going for the crazy outline where you luck into the one card that you need to draw, or the handful of cards that you need. Sometimes you just get there. And early people are developing their boards, and they're not as ready to defend against your crazy plays. So you can get away with a lot if you really push those boundaries.
Yeah, there's also the fact of aggressive. You can really be super aggressive with this deck in comparison to other fast combo decks, because first of all, the Gitrog deck is not like other combo decks. You have a lot of unique pieces that are immune to most conventional interaction, and second of all, a lot of the pieces are Reanimator-esque in the way that okay, I just got this countered. Well, I have this other reanimation spell, so I'm just gonna do this again on the next turn. And Gitrog is kind of like that. You never have to go super all in with the stuff you're going through. So you're not gonna get blown out if your discard outlet gets countered or Gitrog gets removed. Sometimes you have to get all the mana back to get Gitrog back, but this deck does it really well, really well.
Or you tutor up a command beacon and play him for 5 again.
Yeah.
If he gets out of hand.
Yeah, there are very many lines to rebuild out of nothing, which has been a big point in this podcast already.
So the next thing we'll touch on quickly is sequencing. So I have here as an example playing Frog versus the discard outlet first. So obviously in these kinds of scenarios, you're trying to mitigate whether or not what gets countered. Sorry. So generally, if you have Gitrog in play and you go to cast a discard outlet, people are going to be like, that needs to get countered immediately. Because they'll just assume you have Dakmor in hand, and then if they let it resolve, there's nothing they can do. Their counter spells are useless. So that's going to get countered. The same thing is if you have a discard outlet in play and you cast Gitrog, they're going to think the exact same thing. So you should be conscious about how you sequence playing these if you're trying to burst it all in one turn. Generally, you're going to play the Gitrog first and then your discard outlet. Any other sequencing things for you guys?
I think the Frog versus outlet discussion is a very, very interesting one. And it depends a lot on the perceptions of the people that you play with and their threat assessment. So assessing your opponent's threat assessment is key to the sequencing in Gitrog.
That's true. Yeah.
One of the things that I really like to do is if you have an extra tutor or you have an extra outlet, lead with the outlet to gauge their perception of it. And then, if they start countering Frog, you can always replay them. But if they try to remove the outlet in response to the Frog and let you keep the Frog, then you can follow it up with doing more playing another outlet and doing that stuff.
Yeah, it does depend also on what kind of interaction you think they have, right? Because if you think they have Chain of Vapor or something, and you'd much rather lead with your discard outlet because you'd rather have that get bounced than Gitrog.
Exactly.
And then one other note I want to say on sequencing is that the other day I was playing a game with Blitz, and I had Necropotence and Tainted Pact, and I was trying to dig for Dakmor. And what I found is that there's actually lots of intricacies in sequencing, wherein I went for Tainted Pact before the Necropotence, but I'm fairly certain I would have gotten there had I gotten Necropotence before the Tainted Pact, because I would have been able to draw into... either I first get to see a bunch of cards to see whether or not Dagmar gets there, and then I don't have to exile cards to Tainted Pact. And then if I don't get there, if I draw Titan, then that's still live in my hand and protected. So that's good there. Mm-hmm. And then the Tainted Pact, you don't want to have to use the Tainted Pact if you don't have to. Basically, that's kind of what it comes down to. You just try to get as much. Try not to be overly committal when you're sequencing. Use the thing that commits you the least to being all in first, mm-hmm. and then progressively go down that line.
Yeah, leave up as many options as possible. Because
mm-hmm.
A lot of this deck is those draw triggers that you get off Gitrog, and so preparing yourself to react to whatever you draw off of some of those triggers can make the difference between winning the game and losing it. I've had so many games where if I had been a little bit more careful with my mana, just the random assortment of stuff that I drew off of cracking some fetches after I played Gitrog would have gotten me there. And the other way as well, where I played super clean and tight in my setup for Gitrog, and left myself with exactly play to your outs. Be like, okay, I know that if I draw the Putrid Imp in these next 3 cards and I keep up the Swamp, I can just win. But if I end up with like just a colorless mana left over, I'm going to be stuck and have to wait till the next turn. That kind of thing can really make the difference between getting that extra little bit of win percentage.
Okay, and then the last thing we want to cover in piloting advice is your 8-card cleanup step combo hand.
Well, so I just wanted to it's not necessarily what to sculpt here, but I just wanted to point out quickly that some people think it's a sculpt 7, but you can actually sculpt 8, and you can do.
You can actually sculpt 9.
Well, 9. Dagmar's
one
your
of them
9th
being
card.
Dagmar.
Dagmar's your 9th card, so you get to sculpt 8 cards. Which and using the technique. So how this happens is that you discard Dagmar, you dredge it, and then if you net a draw trigger, then that's your 8th card, or your 9th. That's your 9th card and your 8th card excluding Dagmar. So you can get that card into that hand as part of the sculpt. And doing this technique allows you to loop cards like Slaughter Pact, or when you're doing an Autumn's Veil, because otherwise, if you're only on a sculpt 7, so that Dagmar is your 8th card in hand, then you go to cast an Autumn's Veil, that gets countered. You're now at 7 cards in hand, and you can no longer continue the combo, right? If it gets countered, so then you're kind of forced to commit at that point. So this way, you get to go burn through. If you're doing the going up to 9 cards, you get to burn through each one of your green mana individually until you can resolve your Autumn's Veil. Yeah, so that's that. And then we're moving on, I guess, to questions.
Yeah. So we have a few questions that didn't fit necessarily in the other categories. So the first one is about matchups. So what are matchups you want to watch out for, and how do you sort of play when you're in one of those matchups? What do you need to find? Do you hold certain things that you might play? Do you play certain things you might hold, etc.? So, what do you guys think are the worst matchups for Gitrog?
I have a couple listed here. Anafenza. Despite the possibility to loop through Anafenza, still not fun to play against. If you're missing one of the necessary pieces, that somehow, you don't get access to that, then you're still going to have a bad time. Because you also need to be on a very specific list, and the list is not budget at all, right? You need to be running Chains of Mephistopheles, Lion's Eye Diamond. Yeah, so it's not super budget friendly. So if most Gitrog lists are going to lose to Anafenza, Rest in Peace deck. So any deck that can run
playing Rest in Peace.
Yeah. Same goes for Humility, but you don't really see Humility anymore.
Yeah, pretty much I'm the only one who plays it.
Yeah. And then, so Rest in Peace decks really like Xur because it can really easily find it. But beyond that, most decks don't have immediate access to Rest in Peace, so you can kind of bank off that. Though like Najila, they sometimes run Rest in Peace, and that's, that can be problematic for sure. But beyond that, there's only decks that are sometimes impactful. Like nothing's a super awful matchup. Fast decks that are faster kind of suck, because we're not a super interactive deck. You need to have your very little bits of interaction. Like Flash Hulk, you've got exactly your hand attack. Your creature destruction, your artifact enchantment destruction doesn't really do anything. So you either have to race them or have your very few pieces of interaction. So those aren't great, but there's not too many decks that can race us consistently. And then so beyond this, I've got Yisan listed here and Sisay listed here. And the reason for this is that there's two pieces in each of there's a piece in each of these decks that is very annoying to face. Not unbeatable, just annoying. Yisan, obviously, on turn 4, they're going to be on verse 2, which means you're going to see Scavenging Ooze. And that card's annoying because you can only fight through single piece of interaction, grave interaction. So if they have 2 green mana up, which they're going to do because they're Yisan, then that's annoying to fight through. And you're going to want something like Abrupt Decay or Assassin's Trophy to remove it. And then the last being Sisay, because they've got access to Linvala. Do you guys have anything else to add on those?
Yeah, basically, that's a really good sum up. Kind of emphasize on the faster decks. If there's a lot of fast combo that are into the turn 2 or more consistent turn 2 or turn 3 victories, especially with blue, but they still don't use it for interaction, just go for the Flash Hulk. I think a lot of Flash Hulk decks they're not a good matchup for Gitrog, just because they can race, and that's the point where Gitrog can become a parasitic deck of sorts if you don't have the ways and the good card pool to deal with Flash Hulk as soon as the game begins. So
you kind of have to rely on some of the other blue decks to counter or
find a graph cage.
Yeah, or find your early graph cage.
I did
can sometimes be too late unless it's in your opener.
Yeah, I did like a 100 goldfish, which with me being conservative might be a relatively slower average winning turn, but it was on average it was about 1 turn slower than Flash Hulk. So yeah, if there are a lot of faster decks, like a lot of Flash Hulk or something like that, then
I think the Flash Hulk deck you're talking about, that was Breakfast at the time, right?
Yeah,
which had Hermit Druid. So Hermit Druid, like Shuffle Hulk, you can probably raise Shuffle Hulk.
Okay,
because it's a bit slower because they don't have the Hermit wins. Hermit Druid gives so many of the fast, consistent wins in like that really brings down the average turn Goldfish win.
Fortunately, we can deal with Hermit Druid a lot easier if somebody plays it. But yeah, the Lightning Druid lists are sprouting up because of the Jumpstart card, the velocity. I don't remember what it's called.
Maximize velocity.
Yeah, maximize velocity, and those decks can also win very quickly. But yeah.
Okay, so those are bad matchups, and in those matchups, like we said, you're just gonna mulligan for the piece for obviously going fast if you can get around their interaction, or the aspect of their deck that affects you. So against CSN, if their stuff's coming down turn 4, the Scoo's coming down turn 4, you don't need to have interaction or removal in your hand for it if you can just go faster. But then if you're not going faster, you need to make sure that you have a way to either answer what Yisan is going to do itself or remove the Scoo so that you can combo. And that can be applied generally to all the other bad matchups. So as for good matchups, really everything else kind of feels like a good matchup. Or not I guess not necessarily like a super good matchup, just that you never feel like you're out of the game. You always feel like you have a really good chance of winning. At least that's how I feel.
In bad matchups, particularly matchups with very effective grade P decks that you expect to rest in peace or do you change the way you play in anticipation of the Rest in Peace? Is there something you might normally try on turn 2 that you don't, or anything like that?
I mean, don't leave your Dakmor in your graveyard.
Yeah.
But like,
Just
you shouldn't be doing that anyway. I mean, maybe not. I've seen some people like do an early tutor for a dredger and toss it in the yard. That's probably a bad idea if you're expecting them to play Rest in Peace. But like,
Yeah.
other than that, it's. I mean, you.
I
try
feel
not
like
to
you
put
still
all
always
your
want to
important
establish
combo
your early
pieces in your
Gitrog
yard.
to just draw cards.
Exactly.
Make hay while the sun shines.
Yeah.
So you'd play Gitrog even expecting there was a decent chance that your opponent might jam Rest in Peace on the cover
Hell
turn.
yeah.
Yeah,
you gotta
just
take the chance
make them
sometimes.
And
have
you just-
the Rest in Peace.
Exactly. It's one card in their deck, and if they do have it, then you quickly try to find an answer for it so that you can go off. And the nice thing is, if they do have it, people pay way less attention to the fact that you've got a Gitrog in play, because it's killing a land of yours every turn for no benefit. But then it's a lot easier to pull off those instant speed wins where, like, on the end step before your turn, you just blow up the Rest in Peace and go off.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, so that question was by Eckerdixel.
Yep. And our next question by Jim Wolfe is just anything you want to say about the Frog Mirror. We already mentioned chains.
Yeah, don't play chains.
Yeah.
Go faster.
Yeah. Frog Mirror. Be aggressive. The more aggressive player usually wins the Frog Mirror because Frog doesn't have
the blue players that the other one's the threat.
You that's where you want to be slower. You want to be the second to combo if like everyone else has interaction. But like if you're assuming that the other players are kind of like just doing nothing or they're not going to be able to interact, then you want to be the aggressor and you want to force your opponent to have the interaction, right? Like, oh, you're Abrupt Decay, can't remove my Gitrog, so whatever. And if you try to remove my discard, then I'm going to win in response. So what you really need is the Assassin's Trophy. And you know what? That's one card in the deck. So good luck.
Yeah,
you need it.
What it comes down to is if there's two frogs in a 4-player pod, it's gonna the non-frog players are usually just gonna decide which one is going to win because it's so hard to deal with both, and even if you have like counter spells, but then again you know that there's only gonna be two players that are able to control the situation. And that's already -1 player, and then there's two frog players. It's in that situation, it's very hard to not have one frog player just go off. So yeah.
It's pretty rough to be the non-frog player in a pod with two frogs.
Yeah, but when it comes down to like let's say the frog versus when it comes to the frog the duel of frogs, if the two people are in a bad board position or just have blown out their interaction already and this game starts to grind, then that's an interesting situation. Remember the 2017 tournament where we Raiders grasped each other, and I think Neosloth was playing Teferi, and we were just like Raiders grasp. You Braiders Grasp my deck more, and then I was something like play Braiders Grasp and proposing a shortcut that you will play my deck more as your land for the turn, or I get your deck more.
I remember that.
And
that was pretty funny.
Yeah, and the
like mutually assured destruction.
Yeah,
like, I'm gonna take your deck more unless you play my deck more.
Yeah. And then I just got strip mine, so I could take your deck, the deck more into my grave. But it never tricky. It never got into that because the Chain Veil, the fairy just won before that could happen. But yeah, it was a pretty dumb game, and the 3DH games or the 3-player EDH games are usually that. So yeah.
I don't think there's too much else to say about the mirror.
I have to say that does also sound like the world's luckiest Teferi player. Being in a pod where 2 Praetor's Grasps resolved and neither of them took your chain veil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So our final question.
Is it at all worth it to have sorcery and instant speed win cons in the deck, or is it best to just focus entirely on a single instant speed win combo, such as trophy wins? That's from iFenno.
Kiebitzen, you want to go?
I personally don't see the benefit of having a sorcery speed win con in the deck, in addition to other ones.
I'm of the same opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
How that adds value. You can do the instant speed one at sorcery speed if you want to, but I mean, if you want to have 2 win cons, so you've got a backup one, that's a fine decision to make. But there's no reason to have one be sorcery and the other be instant. You might as well have them both be instants. And right now you can win by looping, casting your Ulamog, or by looping trophy.
Yeah.
With
trophy.
Savage Summon, or you can loop trophy, or you can loop Beast Within if you're still on that.
And then I was actually, we were talking earlier about before the podcast about how I was considering going back to a mono black instant speed win con, so that you can have access. You can utilize, like in the cleanup step, you can utilize your green mana as actual protection for resolving Autumn's Veil. And that's something that's worth considering. You're always going to have access to that Ulamog Savage Summoning and a trophy, because those are probably never coming out, especially if you're on the because Ulamog I still think is better than Kozilek in generic lists, because it lets you push through Null Rod in some niche circumstances where you can't access green anymore because you've used your ESG. And so I think Ulamog is still better than Kozilek generically. So you'll pretty much always have access to your Ulamog lines and your trophy lines, but having the ability to push through extra counter magic in the cleanup step by including that extra win con, that's something worth considering. But again, I don't think I'd ever put a sorcery speed win con back in the deck.
And the fact you mentioned also that, for example, if you're trying to win in response to like a Flash Hulk player trying to go off, then if you just have the permanent removal stuff, you can get yourself into a bind if they go grab their what's his name, Grand Abolisher, because then they can go off, and you can't do anything about it unless you are running the Macabre and they're not doing the shuffle stuff where they can get it back, and it convoluted back and forth. But if you have a way to actually kill people, like a Death Verdict or something like that, then you can get around that sort of thing and just kill them outright in response to their flash.
So I notice, Leptys, in your list, you still have Praetor's Grasp, which lets you actually kill your opponents at sorcery speed, and you're reliant on you don't have a way to actually take them out of the game at instant speed. You mentioned that you liked Praetor's Grasp, like just generically, so...
I agree with these fine gentlemen here that you don't need sorcery speed. Definitely you don't need sorcery speed cards to go off. I play Praetor's Grasp just because of personal preference. And it's not a win con card. First, it is a way to get a grip of something. It's like, it kind of works in the same way as Thoughtseize would. You get a fine grasp of somebody's hand when you grasp them, pun intended. But that first you get the information of what they have in their hand. Second, you get to play around that information by getting something that helps your game plan, but hurts them. Usually ad nauseum, but there are some corner cases, and it's just I always have seen it as a strictly better Grim Tutor, which is why I still run Praetor's Grasp. And I after cutting it and re-adding it, I overall just like the card. It is a backup win condition second, just because I see myself going off a lot at sorcerer speed, but at instant speed I run the Beast Within instead of Ulamog, so I'm a kind of a conservativist rebel, I guess, when it comes to comparing my list with Kiebitzen's or Noob Source's deck. But yeah, just run the cards you like and you see most relevant in your meta game, I say. That's at least those are at least my 2 cents on the matter.
The cool thing is, with the deck like this, where you can loop literally anything, you can win with just about anything. So there's a large selection of cards that will actually win you the game when you loop them. So yeah, like Lepty said, play whatever is good in your meta. That also happens to be a win con. If you're against a bunch of Narthets, run that Guess Verdict, because you'll get Narset all the time with it, and then you also just win with it. If you're up against all kinds of Reanimator decks, play the Ebony Charm, and it's also a win con. But there's a lot of flexibility there, and a lot of potential to tune for your meta and for what works for your playstyle as well.
Nice.
All right. Is there anything
don't
else?
Play Exsanguinate.
Don't play Exsanguinate.
Yeah, not
Okay.
Exsanguinate.
Okay.
No excuse for that.
Is there anything
a
else
card.
anyone wants to say about Gitrog before we go into our closing?
So I just want to say, anyone who's made it this far into the podcast, I mean, you have to be like a Gitrog super fan. just throw it on like for 2+ hours, all about
Man,
Gitrog.
I'm almost asleep.
Yeah. And you know what? There's still lots of things we didn't cover. You know, like early. We're not going to get into them, but you know, early tutor targets. You know, what are you finding with your tutors? Are you finding like Sylvan Library, Loam, like when to find all that stuff? We didn't talk about many of our loops. There's still so much more details of Gitrog that we couldn't possibly cover in this episode, or if we were to extend this for future, like it's just so much content. So definitely come to the Frog Discord, and if this has inspired you to ask any further questions, or you want to know more stuff like about how to do Chains of Mephistopheles, that's something that maybe I should I'll throw in maybe an explanation of me recording a how Chains works, just so that we have somewhere where it's explained and people can just put that on repeat, because I've had to give that explanation a few times. It's not actually too hard. And I highly recommend looking at all the primers. Everybody's put a lot of work into the content that's there, and done a lot of thinking about these decks. A lot of good content out there. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, some of the primers are some of the loops, again, like I said earlier, are out of date. So we might look into getting together like a Word doc or something like that, where we can keep the loops up to date and have all the different variations, because your how you approach the cleanup step sculpt is not the same every time, depending on stacks, pieces, blah 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 blah. So yeah, we can look into getting that sorted. But yeah.
All right. Let's wrap things up. So the first thing I want to do is give a massive thank you to both Leptys and Kiebitzen.
What? No, thank you for me? Oh, come on.
Well, I mean,
just kidding.
Who agreed to do this? With our group, and provided some really interesting thoughts and some great discussion. So thanks to you both.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting us.
I am humbled and also much appreciated for the thanks. And yeah, I'm still here and able to talk about Gitrog and being able to give my old timers opinion, if you might call it that, by the sheer fact that you guys are still around and experimenting with the deck. And yeah, it's good to see that Gitrog has withstood the test of time very, very, very well, more than probably any other prevalent CDH deck out there. There are some like Storm and Atmos and stuff like that, but but like Gitrog is just consistently out there and consistently beating out other CDH decks. So that's a thing.
It's also insanely popular. I'm constantly surprised by how many people are in the Gitrog Discord compared to other other stuff. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. The next people I want to thank is everyone who has given us any form of support, be that just comments on Reddit or on our Discord, and special shoutouts to MS Lover for our logo and Hiss for our music.
Our
thank you to
audio
everyone
engineer.
Oh yes, and our audio engineer Kevin, cannot forget. And anyone who made it at least 90 minutes into this podcast, you're a champ. So be sure, if you want to talk to us, be sure to join the Into the North Discord. If you want to learn more about Gitrog, join the Gitrog Discord. We'll make sure to link both of those. And we'd love to hear from you. Do you want more content like this? Which kinds of decks would you like us to go into? Were there any sections you found really helpful? Maybe some you thought took a little too much time and maybe should be shortened in the future? Just any thoughts you have on this type of content, we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.